Time now for Focus, and today we have a report on France's Operation Sentinelle, in which combat troops patrol streets and protect key sites. It started after the January 2015 terrorist attacks. Now there are about 10,000 troops across the country. Their mission is to protect, dissuade and reassure, but the Operation Sentinelle troops have also become a target. France 2's Dorothée Olliéric and France 24's François Wibaux report.
These are the soldiers of Operation Sentinelle, here to protect against terrorism, but increasingly they have become targets.
I get the feeling that every day there's more and more danger. At any moment there can be a problem, an attack, terrorism, anything.
On the 1st of October, at Marseille's main train station, a soldier shot down an assailant who had just killed 2 young women. In February, at the Louvre Museum in Paris, a serviceman was attacked with a machete. A month later, at Orly Airport, a man was killed by Sentinelle forces after he threatened them with a knife and tried to steal their weapons. And just last April, in a Paris suburb, a vehicle ploughed into a Sentinelle patrol. A total of 8 attacks since the beginning of the year. Given the threat levels, patrols are planned like military operations. An intensive training program to prepare them for patrols of over 20 kilometers per day.
The patrols go from morning to evening, the whole day. And yes, we're probably walking around 20 to 25 kilometers, depending on the areas we operate in.
So who are the men behind Operation Sentinelle?
Première classe Nabarlatz, 20 ans.
Caporal William, 25 ans.
Première classe François, 21 ans. Première classe Kevin, 21 ans.
These young Marine recruits are practicing hand-to-hand combat techniques.
Coup d'arrêt. J'ai juste une rotation par-dessus sa tête.
To neutralize new enemies.
C'est la manip. Ça permet à des gens.
This allows people who have never done any combat sports to acquire efficient techniques which can be used to quickly neutralize someone.
Neutraliser quelqu'un.
Techniques they can now use while on patrol in the middle of Paris or anywhere else in the country.
Lâche. Okay.
We don't carry out this mission far away, we carry it out right among French people. And so inevitably, because the French are under threat, well, so are we. We wear the French Army's uniform, so we're part of this mission that entails some risk. Are we a target, or rather more of a shield?
Protecting civilians, like in Marseille, the attack is still on everyone's mind, especially for these young servicemen. Kill or be killed, they think about it every day.
If someone else's life is in danger or one of my fellow soldiers, yes, I'll shoot, no question about it. The questions will come after, I think.
That's what one of the reservists did in Marseille?
Yes, at Saint-Charles.
He had the bravery to do it, and I congratulate him, because that took courage. He really showed that the army was there, that it was present.
The fact that we're there, well, it's a real deterrent. As it's been said, we're trained for this. If anything happens, we'll know how to react accordingly.
At Orly Airport, there is heavy military presence, and these soldiers are amongst the most experienced.
So for us, departure at 1400 hours, 1-7 formation.
They wear the green beret of the Foreign Legion, troops which are usually seen on the field of battle.
Today our mission is Sentinelle, tomorrow it might be Mali. For us, only the mission matters, and we'll give it our very best.
But not all passengers are reassured by their presence.
It's a little bit worrying, but at the same time, it gives us the feeling that we're protected.
The psychological effect is undeniable, and scenes like these are now part of everyday life in France.
For more on this, I'm now joined by Alexandre Vautravers, a security expert at the University of Geneva's Global Studies Institute. Hello, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, is France's Operation Sentinelle working?
Definitely it is working because it has two major objectives. The first is to deter attacks, and definitely the very sheer military armed presence achieves this to a great extent. And number two, in the case of the event of an attack, you already have a lot of troops, whether they are gendarmes or they are police or they are military. This is not really the issue, but you have people who are available at an arm's length from the situation and who can help the local population.
So you believe then, because critics say that it's not really an efficient use of a highly trained army, but you believe it is?
Naturally, the question is that we would like to have specialized police perform these tasks. But the fact of the matter is this specialized police does not exist, and it is very difficult to recruit and to train the number of people required and also the costs associated with hiring thousands of law enforcement agents or officers who are going to have to be trained for 1, 2, or 3 years before they can actually practice their activity. This is not in the books. It doesn't work. And therefore, the army is being used as a strategic reserve by the French government.
How has the operation changed over the years?
There has been a lot of adaptation, and definitely the initial engagements of the troops of Vigipirate were quite static. The idea was to protect certain infrastructures, certain buildings, certain religious monuments. And since the last 2 years, a lot has been gained, a lot has been acquired in terms of best practices. And as your documentary shows very well, most of the patrols today are mobile, they are agile, they are on foot and not in vehicles. All reasons that make it more efficient, if you will, and that make the military, the soldiers, less of a target.
You mentioned the cost before. Do you know if there's much money invested in giving these soldiers psychological help if they need it? Because, of course, this isn't just a tough job physically. It's hard on their morale. It seems some of the soldiers we saw in that report, obviously it really gets to them, especially when they can be a target themselves.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a lot of fatigue that is associated with this. I'll give you an example that comes from Switzerland. For over 15 years now, the military has been patrolling and guarding a number of international organizations in Geneva, in Zurich, and in Bern, our capital city. So there is definitely a lot of fatigue associated with this, and there is a limit as to how long the military can perform this task, perform this mission, while at the same time, and this is perhaps even more important, while at the same time being engaged in all sorts of other military operations overseas.
Now, what about the French people? And you mentioned their similar operations in Switzerland. Generally, do operations like this, putting soldiers out onto the streets, as intimidating as it might be, have a lot of support from the general population?
It's generally the case, and let me just stress here, there's a big difference between the opinion of the population in Paris or in Marseille, perhaps a few hours or a few days or a few even weeks and months after an incident, after a terrorist attack has taken place. Then you have very clearly a demand from the population, from the shop owners, from the town mayors, from the local authorities. You have a lot of demand to have physical presence of uniformed troops. And of course, as things go by, after a couple of weeks, after a couple of months, then perhaps the same opinion of the passers-by changes and would like to go back to normalcy. But I think that Vigipirate and Sentinelle have acknowledged this and have allowed for this flexible response and for this adaptation of the military presence.
Okay, Alexandre Vautravers, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. Let's go to a break. I'll be back at the top of the hour.